Greetings, YouTube. This is the Garage Autonomist. I have an action-packed weekend uh, coming up. Soon as Mrs. Autonomous comes back from handling some business, because this is actually going to be our last weekend that we've had alone uh, in the last 3 weeks or so. That's what just also explains why I haven't really been making a lot of videos. Both of our children have been out of town for the past 3 weeks for the summer. The oldest comes back tomorrow. So this is pretty much going to be our last hurrah. We've had a very enjoyable break. It's one of those things that if you ever become parents, you know exactly. I mean, if you are a parent, you know exactly where we're coming from here. You take your vacations with your partner where you can find them, even though you're both working once the kids are gone. So I'm going to use this as an autonomous lounge. And there's two things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the question that was raised well, I made a comment on my last hangout from this channel where I said just offhandedly that we don't need the police. And of course, our comrade of mine who was in the chat at the time, a narco blonde, happened to throw that out there as well. And Curious, who was was part of the hangout, said, "I don't know. I mean, I know that the police are racist and they have a lot of other issues, but I'm not really there to feel comfortable as of yet about saying if we don't need them. How do you deal with rapists and other forms of criminals?" And so I want to talk a little bit about that. But before I get in on that, I want to say that I'm about to look at a film. It'll be my second time watching this movie because my wife didn't watch it. She was at work yesterday. I went and looked at it by myself, and I thought it was really, really good. If you get a chance, check out Matt Ross's or Matthew Ross, Matt Ross. Check out Matt Ross's Captain Fantastic. It stars Viggo Mortensen. It's a really good movie. I don't want to give out the plot. I'm not going to do like a straight up review right now, but it's basically about a movie about a family that has an alternative lifestyle and that they've taken themselves, the Viggo Mortensen character and his wife decided to go off grid, if you will, to not live in contemporary America and basically to live off the land by themselves. They mentioned in earlier parts of their lives when they had about 6 kids together, and they mentioned when the first children were babies that there was a farm in Oregon and there was this and that. I think there was even a commune at some point. But then they decided to just straight up move to the mountains of Washington State. And that's where I think they bought a plot of land or some shit like that. And they decided to homeschool their children. Now, first thing that I've noticed, and that was a thing of note for me, was, hold on just for 1 second. Just want to make sure. Just want to make sure I am online and everything is looking normal. Okay. So, all right. Yeah. Just want to make sure everything is looking normal in the watch page. So, as I was saying, the family decided to live, or rather, the husband and wife decided to live off grid and raise their family in the mountains of Washington State. But a family emergency occurred that takes them all out of Washington State and have to deal with the outside world. And some interesting things come about. Now, the first thing that I observed as I was watching this film was how the father is more like in my age group, so or generations. Therefore, he's a Gen Xer, and I don't know about the millennials and the Gen Y people, but I know that I think we because our generation was raised by the baby boomers, and some of the baby boomers, a huge number of them actually, themselves have tried to do this sort of alternative lifestyle of raising children and raising a family outside of the contemporary American or capitalist structure, either living off grid or just starting their own farms and things like that, or living in communes. And a lot of Gen Xers have also tried to do the same thing. Not a lot. I shouldn't say a lot at all. A handful of us. So I know for a fact that between my wife and I together, we have about 11 friends who are currently living in this way. And I would say about maybe 6 out of the 11 are homeschooling their children, and the ones who are more like my friends are the ones that are actually quote unquote unschooling their children. I'm going to throw a link in the low bar of this session just to give you an idea about what unschooling means, but it's basically a form of self-educating the children without a curriculum, unlike homeschooling. Homeschooling, there is a set curriculum. There are plenty of resources for parents who want to homeschool to choose from. But in the case of unschooling, which is where a child just takes it upon themselves to figure out what it is that they really want to learn and study, I guess the only part where the parent comes in uh, and, and to provide make sure that there's some level of discipline in making sure that the child sticks with that, or maybe not, depending on what the parent is. Their politics, they might be anarchists. They may say, I don't care if you want to learn, try to teach yourself astronomy 1 week or a couple of months, then you want to jump over and learn something else. That's fine with me. I don't care. Some parents might have a different point of view on that, but that's what the parents in this movie had done. The children were extremely smart, but they were not at all prepared for the rest of the world. And now I guess that was one of the main conflicts. There were many others. It's a beautiful film. You just really got to go see it. If you don't know who Matt Ross is, if you are watching the TV show that is currently on air on HBO, Silicon Valley, he plays the guy who runs Hooli, or the quote unquote Google of the show. He also played Albie from Big Love. Awesome character and villain. He's normally playing villains, as a matter of fact, Matt Ross. So this is his first time where he's written and directed a movie. So if you get a chance, check it out. It premiered, I think, a week ago or something like that. So, or maybe a couple of weeks ago. But I'm definitely going to go and see it again today, or with my wife, after me telling her about it, and considering that we've got so many friends who are living these lifestyles. So we're gonna see it. All right. So I just wanted to touch on that. Oh, but well, actually, no. There's a couple more things about the movie that got me thinking about family again, because I talked about family or raising children as radical parents as a mini series in my earlier Autonomous Lounge episodes. And it does bring to mind this movie about why we choose to have children and why we choose to raise families. You see some people and you're like, wow, why did you decide to get married and have kids, or even not get married? Why did you decide to just have children? You're an idiot and you're dumb as a stump. What are you passing on to your children? It seems that we do it just to do it. I know that with my wife and I, there was definitely a reason behind it. We felt that we had a value system and beliefs that our are dwindling away, if you will, and we wanted to make sure that our children would further or help human society and with those values that we believe in. And a lot of other people out there don't think that way. I think that there seems to be this idea of just, well, it's what you do when you become an adult. You have children, um, and that's what you do. and it's usually these people with that mindset. And there's a scene, and again, I don't. This is not an official review, and I don't really want to give away the plot, but I'll give out the spoiler alert at this point. But there's a part in the movie where the children of the main characters meet their cousins who live in New Mexico, who live in the city. They're not very specific about which city. They don't say Santa Fe. It's certainly not Santa Fe. I would remember if it was Santa Fe. But they go to visit the cousins. And the cousins and I immediately thought about the demographic that YouTube tries to appeal to. I immediately thought about the audience members of Thunderfoot, or the audience members of Amazing Atheist, or the Alex Jones demographic. Like, just these bratty males full of this toxic masculinity. The main character asks them some really basic shit, considering that both of these kids were, they were definitely older than the last two of the youngest of the main character's children. And neither one of these dudes could tell you what the Bill of Rights is, right? But they're parked in front of their very large television, most likely purchased at Walmart, and they play video games all day, and they're older, right? So the main character brings out the youngest kid, and she begins just kind of firing off by memory of what the Bill of Rights is. But then the main character, the father, was like, no, 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 no. Okay, we get that you can regurgitate that now. Tell us about your interpretation, which is really interesting, because this is the kind of thing that we get on our children a lot when it comes to their own education, because we don't want them just doing book reports, because we know that the teachers will accept a book report where you're just regurgitating what you read, and then you're simply saying, and this happened, and that happened. But we want our children, we've always got on them about this when you're writing a book report. We want you also to work within that framework of the classic book report and give us a deconstruction of the characters, of the story, what you think, why you think they did A, B, and C. Like, that's what we hit on. And of course, it doesn't fail. It works. Our children have benefited from getting them to think critically about everything that they consume or read or see. So it was a great part in the film, because that's what brought to my mind, like, why do people have children? Versus, you see that the main character, the Viggo Mortensen character, and his wife, they had a mission, if you will, a purpose and a point of making a family. There was no just, well, our parents did it and so should we, or it's to mark our adulthood and so should we. There was an actual point to it. And it doesn't always have to be that way. Like, if you're single right now and you don't have kids, and I've said this in older autonomous lounges, don't have kids. Like, just don't do it. Believe me, you have no idea the kinds of shit that you can do in this young part of your life, and the potential of you being able to accomplish so many things without children. And it sounds mean, but that is a reality. It is a real fucking reality. So you should just, you should think twice, thrice, thrice, if that's a word, about having kids at a young age. Like, don't listen to your parents, don't listen to your grandparents, don't listen to these fucking pissed off, bitter old men at work telling you, why aren't you with a kid? Are you gay or something? Like, no, man, just fucking do what you need to do when you do it. But if you really do come to that point where you're like, dude, our society sucks, and I know this because of the values and beliefs that I have, and if I were to have children, I don't want them to be this way. So I know that I want them to contribute to the fabric of human life and society. Uh, and that's why I want to have kids. And so I could I totally identify with that. You can imagine why these characters did what they did. They just simply chose to do it differently. Living off grid at this point is certainly not our way of doing it, not in our option, not that we're not capable, but it is a little too late. It's one of those things you have to do before you even have kids. I would strongly suggest if that's what if you ever plan to do it. But we certainly I certainly saw a lot of familiarity with the characters and the way they were educating their children, or the way they were educating their children at home. We're not homeschoolers, but we certainly take up the job of being the backup of our children's education here in our house. Daily dinners are always going to be about some major discussion about something. That's just how it is here. So again, the name of the movie is called Captain Fantastic. Stars Viggo Mortensen. I don't know if I ever pronounced his last name correctly, but you'll know him as soon as you see him. Yes, he played Aragorn of the Lord of the Rings trilogies. I think that as much money as that man has most likely made from those three movies, he's in a position where he can pick and choose whatever the fuck he wants to star in, which is probably the reason why you don't see him in a lot of stuff. But when he does pick something to be in, it's usually very fucking good. And I guess that's the purpose every now and then of quote unquote selling out to do mainstream stuff, because if you make a really good choice and you get a huge payout in the end, then you can afford to do the kinds of movies or art that you really want to do, and not have to worry about having to balance the two, or where your next paycheck is going to come from and how you're going to pay rent and all of that. You can still stay true to your art. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that movie. Now I want to get on to the second topic, and then after that, I'm gonna leave. So, I know this was gonna be a short thing. Like I said, I didn't have enough time to do an autonomous lounge and record it and edit it and stuff, because this is pretty much the last weekend for my wife and I as single parents, as childless parents, because tomorrow the oldest one comes back from California. So let's see. I wanted to talk about, do we need the police? Now, 2 weeks ago, I was challenged by a question posed by Curious, as I mentioned earlier, when I made the offhand comment that we don't need the police. She asked, how could you say that when you have rapists and thieves? And she went on to comment that while she hates murderous police, she couldn't feel safe in a society without them. Now, Curious's position is no different from a million others who feel this way. And even as there are thousands who have protested and organized over the last 30 years regarding police brutality, racist police, and uh, classist and racist public policy interwoven in the criminal justice system, most of those who oppose this unjust system often shares the same perspective as Curious. Now, I came to the conclusion some 25 years ago that we don't need the police. At first, it was a mindless towing the line of the Marxist Leninist Party that I was in as a youth. But as my class consciousness did deepen and expanded, it didn't take any amount of self communist literature, self hypnosis from reading communist literature to see the connection between poverty and crime, and seeing the difference between people who commit crime because they are part of a layer of non working surplus workers deemed as unemployable as defined by the state and the ruling class, versus people who commit acts such as rape or serial killing or any of that shit along sociopathic reasoning. Uh, when you look at the statistics, I'm going to do a quick screen share. Give me a second. on. Here we go. Uh, all right. So I'm going to do a quick screen share here, and I want you to look at. And I want you to look at some of these numbers here. Now, this is from the Bureau of Prisons, and it shows the number of people who are typically in federal prisons today. Uh, but I've looked at other like state penitentiaries and things, and the numbers are they're not consistent or exact, but one thing that is consistent is who fills up the bunks mostly. And it's mainly people who are arrested and convicted of drug offenses. That means either possession of drugs and or the selling of them. Now, the people in category E in this chart of drug offenses, for instance, in this particular plate, a number of inmates close to 85,124, which makes up a 46.3 percentage, versus, and let's look for sex offenders in the L section, only 14,643, 8.3%. Robbery is only 6,958, 3.8. Why am I bringing all this up? Because those who commit crimes like drug dealing, drug selling, those who might commit violent crime, now they're the only second highest number, by the way. Aggravated assault and things like this, but usually that's connected to robberies. And those so those who commit these crimes obviously are people who do it because they are what? They don't have money, they are poor. Then you have those. Then, if you want to talk about those who are, again, sociopaths, people who commit rapes, serial murders, things like that, very low number, at least in terms of those in the prisons. What does this mean? That if we really did have an economically just society, we would see lower numbers. Or if we actually legalize drugs, we would see lower numbers in terms of people being convicted. And then you have to wonder, well, what is really truly the role of the police? They cannot, when it comes to rapes and when it comes to rapists, and again, serial killers and people who just do crimes because they just want to do them, that sort of thing that's not connected to poverty or any of that. The police don't prevent those crimes. But then again, when it comes to drug dealing and gang banging or any kind of form of organized crime, they don't really prevent that either. So you have to kind of wonder and question, what the fuck is the role of the police? Who are they? Now, let me see something here. I'm going to leave that up just for you to look at it. You know what? I don't know if I can, hold on here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can't. I'm going to have to go back to this. All right. So that's pretty much where so now you can understand it. One, you've got a socioeconomic situation that actually can destroy or prevent the biggest offenders that are sitting in prisons now. That has nothing to do with police work at all. I mean, they make the arrests, sure, but if it wasn't for the socioeconomic situation, they wouldn't really have a need. They really wouldn't have a need to be doing anything. That's just goes to show you that the war on drugs is what really keeps the police force alive. If you want to talk about the other kinds of crimes, again, when rapes happen, they are very rarely prevented or stopped by the police as they are happening. Now, the arrests of people who commit these crimes happen. Often, it's really the victims who put them in the prisons. They will report it. They will do their best to remember details, and hopefully, the police will go and find these people and put them in jail. Now, back in the day, in the earlier day of rape prevention, rape crisis centers and things like that, there was a point before people were able to get funding and things of that nature. There was grassroots organizing around that kind of work, and part of that level of grassroots organizing was in the streets. And what was happening? It was mainly women, okay, who were meeting women at train bus bus stops, train stops and things like that, and offering to walk women home where they knew rapes were happening in certain areas. See, if you want to talk about a community preventing crime or dealing with people who commit crime, right? Then it's obvious that it really is. If anyone will know at best who's doing the wrong in the community, it's most likely the community members, not the police. You can have them sitting around and occupying a neighborhood 24/7, and in some areas they do. And you can ask anyone living in those areas, do they feel safer because the police are there, safer from the criminals? And they'll tell you no. Why? Because they know the criminals are still operating. But if the people within those communities actually did decide that they wanted to organize and protect themselves, and you can say whatever you want that I'm advocating some form of vigilantism, I would say that what you're doing is you're forming that community should be forming a form of security squads, if you will, or self-defense squads, and they should have a dual purpose. One, dealing with those who are the scourge of their community, and also dealing with terrorist organizations that are that are occupying their communities. And that terrorist organization, of course, is the police, your average police department. So, defending yourself against cops, which is what the Black Panthers used to do, and you can indeed deal with our own members of our community who are feeding off of the rest of us with their selling of drugs and stuff. But that doesn't really stop the issue if you can't get rid of poverty. So that's one of the things that we have to work on. And the only way we're going to be able to get rid of poverty is by destroying capitalism. Now, that's very abstract. That kind of goes into pie in the sky thinking, as I'm pretty sure a lot of people will then say. But uh, I mean, I don't know what else. There is no other way around that. We've tried all the other things. We've tried to reform. We've tried to create little after school programs and job programs. But let's face it, capitalists don't play. They don't want to play that game. They don't give a shit about creating jobs in this country. They never have. That's not even their purpose, is to create jobs for people. Their purpose is to make money. And how have they been maximizing their profits for the last almost 30 years? Through slave labor. And how have they been doing that? In other countries. That's why Mars Company, the candy bar company, picked up and went off to Asia, or went off to wherever they went. I forgot where they went. They don't give a shit about the people who used to work there 2 and 3 generations thick. They don't care. That's not their purpose. That's not the point of what capitalists do. That's not of concern of the ruling class. And it never has been. Anyway, I want to read something to you guys. Give me a minute. I should have already had it up, but I accidentally clicked out of it. So meanwhile, I'll tell you guys what I thought. I loved the first episode that we did at Food for Thought. And I think that we did a decent job that night talking about neocolonialism and the neocolonialist mindset, materialism with amongst people of color and poor people and working people and women. I thought that we did a. I thought it was fun. It was a good thing. Force 100 was there as always to support us in the chat room with with his point of view, and it was great. And so we had a really good session. So let's see here. Now, why is the main reason why I decided that I wanted to talk about that we don't need police? I wanted to bring up the Corin Gaines case. Now, you're going to hear a lot of different viewpoints about the Corin Gaines case, especially from those who just 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, 2, 3 weeks ago, were up in arms and angry at the death of Alton Sterling and Philandro Castile, because we saw fully captured these men who were unarmed, did not have weapons in their hands, and they were shot and murdered by the police. Now, in the case of Corin Gaines, the police came to her home. She had a weapon. She told them that she had a weapon. She even pulled and drew the weapon on them. An exchange of gunfire ensued, and she wound up getting killed. And her son was shot in the arm. He's alive and he's in the hospital. And from what I understand, he's now telling people what happened, his side of the story. A lot of things are going on with the press. They're trying to say that she was bipolar. Some people said that because she was into this whole sovereign nation nonsense, and it is nonsense. I'm not a huge fan of those people because often those who buy into that subculture, that movement, are usually people who are also horribly misinformed and not completely literate of that movement's position on most things. And usually, and I knew something like this was going to happen. But one thing I will tell you, and I don't apologize. I'm not an apologist for the police in this case. But I will tell you that I don't apologize for what Corinne Gaines had done. Now, me personally, would I be drawing a weapon on the police if I were in that situation and my children were in the house? Most likely not. They came there with an arrest or warrant for me, and if they actually had it, I would go only because I know that the pigs are murderous, and I don't want my children involved or in danger in that way. If it was a situation where it was just me, and even then, I may think a little bit about, was this a fight that needed to happen? Do I need to do this now? It's a different story. Oh, good. Vegan anarchist is here. He says abolish the police. Yeah, fuck the police, and they do need to be abolished, just as capitalism needs to be abolished. Which of course is the system that, which is the system, of course, that gives them power. Without capitalism, you cut the fucking put the strings of the puppet, and the puppet, of course, are the police. I want to read something to you all. So Corinne Gaines, so that's what happened there with Corinne Gaines. She had every right to want to defend herself from the police as she saw fit. She didn't want them there. I don't care about the warrant. But do I, as a parent, do I have a different viewpoint about when to do something like that? Yeah, and I could be faulted for that and whatever else. But I'm sorry, I have kids, and and that comes to my mind first and foremost. She's had many run-ins with the police as well. I mean, we're going to hear a lot of little excuse making this time around for the state, as they always do. But this time they're going to say, "Well, wrong is wrong." Fuck all of that. They didn't. You know what they could have done. But the other thing that disturbs me a great deal is the so-called negotiator, because there was supposed to be a standoff, and there was supposed to be the negotiator. You guys remember negotiators in old cop TV shows. It's always the guy that had like the liberal arts degree. Maybe he has like a picture of Cesar Chavez on his wall, with JFK in the middle and Martin Luther King on the other side. And he was the one, he always had a button down shirt, didn't have a tie. And he went out there to go and try to talk somebody out of something. And even then, like, he probably knew like 3 or 4 languages. And, this time around, it was Consuela, the angry maid who had like the evil boss's kid at gunpoint or broom point or some shit, and he was able to talk her down, and everybody went home safely, and that bullshit. From the old cop shows. I'm old as shit, so we had there was that thing happening, because cop culture is a real thing, and there was that thing going on where post radical '60s era where they were trying to do everything they could to make cops look cool. You had Beretta, who was, knew how to speak like a junkie and think and talk like a junkie, and Serpico and all these kinds of guys. So yeah, you had like that one character, the negotiator. Well, here's the thing. That guy never existed. Okay. And he doesn't exist. He or she does not exist today either. Now, their idea of negotiating is, what can we do to make sure the press and no one else are acting as witnesses before we go ahead and blow somebody away? And in this case, there is a portal for law enforcement that whoever the highest ranking official is, or the quote unquote negotiator, who's actually supposed to diffuse conflict. That's their jobs, but bullshit, that's not their jobs. Anyway, what they do is now they're able to go ahead, log into this portal, and contact whatever social media or account, and simply ask, hey, we want you to deactivate this person. They are currently doing a live feed about, and we're trying to quote unquote negotiate this conflict, i.e., we want you to shut them down so we can blow somebody away. And that's basically what these so-called negotiators do. And that's where they are right now. And sorry, this is one reason. I mean, yeah, look, I'm not pure as a radical. I have a Facebook account. Yes, I do. It's a personal account. But I certainly would never use it for political purposes. I would never do like real organizing through Facebook, because yeah, it's being spied on by a lot of people, by law enforcement. So, and plus, you got all the marketing and shit on there too. But my point is that that's the reason why you can't look at Facebook and all that. They're compromised. They're corporations. Okay, they're not like ran by your friends or your buddies down the street who got together and bought some server space and decided to create a social network. Those days are gone. That's not who these people are now. That's not who Facebook is now. That's not really who YouTube is now. I don't have anything immediate. There was some older independently run feed services. If anyone out there could think of any, inbox me so I could add that to the low bar of this session. But if you want to start doing live feeds where that's not going to be that isn't compromised by the police, then you should use that and not rely on bullshit like Facebook, because they will sell you out. Now, okay, yeah, I'm running out of time, but I'm not going to run out of time enough to do what I need to do here. I want to read something to you. It's from a webpage called Cop Block. And I'm going to post this article, this blog, in the low bar, but I want to read an excerpt from you. No, I have enough time to read this, the whole thing. It's kind of short. So here we go. This is called Do We Need the Police, written by Scott McPherson from the webpage Cop Block. I will put the link in the low bar. Last week, police killed another unarmed man, this time in Phoenix. Romain Brisbane was shot twice in the chest for selling drugs. That's not the official version. The officers said they mistook a pill bottle he was carrying for a gun, of course. And Eric Garner's open, empty hand held outstretched before him as a police officer choked his life away was no doubt trying to effect a karate chop. Uh, yeah. No, yes, you know, this was written about 2 years ago. No account for Brisbane's actions, including from the police, claimed that he was threatening anyone at the time of his death. He also didn't have a gun on him. That fact, too, has been acknowledged by the police. According to some, police officers are professional, highly trained officers of the law on whom we must rely for our protection every single moment of the day. In these people's terrifying world, barbarian hordes would overrun civilization if not for our brave boys in blue, quote unquote. For many Americans, the boys in blue are the barbarians. Police do, from time to time, save innocent lives. Other times, however, they're not so useful. They taser old ladies, throw hand grenades at the babies' cribs during many commando style SWAT raids. Yes, we know about this case. Sorry. They even shoot kids that are playing with toy guns, as with the case of Tamir Rice. An investigation of the Cleveland Police Department recently revealed that officers engaging in excessive force far too often. But two issues loom larger than sorry, the efficacy or pathology of a professional enforcement class. First, what purpose do the police serve in free society? Cops should exist to keep the peace, to protect life, liberty, and property, period. Those whose actions do not harm others or interfere with their equal freedom to use their own bodies and slash or property in a peaceful manner should never face a thug scrum of uniformed harassers ever. Accidents happen, mistakes can be made, but they should result from human error, not by design. Some members of the public seem to delight in seeing police officers employing all manner of force against legally disarmed civilians for purposes other than the protection of life, liberty, and property, which tells us a lot about the psychology of such people. It doesn't change the nature of legitimate power. Second, we should remember that police power is, by definition, nothing but an extension of the legitimate power each person holds to defend his life and property and the lives and property of others against criminals. Most people prefer to spend their time in more productive pursuits and so delegate tasks to the police. Yet, in order to delegate authority to an individual or group, one must first have that power in oneself. It is not a magic it's not a magic conferred from one high on high to an enlightened elite, but instead extension of everyone's right to self-defense. Nor does the day-to-day performance in theory of this task by a professional police force mean that individuals surrender this right and power. Far from it. In the United States alone, millions of private citizens use force to defend themselves, their loved ones, and their property every single year. Private citizens kill more dangerous maniacs each year than do the police, which goes back to my original point. Uh, we've seen people, as we said earlier, in the earlier days of rape prevention and rape and rape prevention centers and things of that nature, there were groups of activists, volunteers who went out and walked people home, especially in areas where they knew that there was a serial rapist, or there was a series of rapes happening in certain areas. Obviously, we need to start to go back to doing things like that again. The police do not do are not good at that kind of work. They don't do that at all. As a matter of fact, and look, the part of the problem or issue with rape also in the past was the main huge chunk of it were indeed the police, because what they were doing was second guessing or questioning what the women did. uh, what were you dressed like? Are you sure you did? There's a huge amount of prostitutes out here. If you were dressed in that way, maybe they thought you were a prostitute, as if that's another thing in saying, hey, if if prostitutes get raped, that's totally okay. They're prostitutes. Like, the police were a huge chunk in stopping any kind of further form of investigation or bringing to justice a rapist. So, again, they were never really a help in that regard. Anyway, continue on reading, and I'm just going to come down to this bottom part. Should we have professional tax funded police officers? Would we be better off without them? Maybe so, maybe not. One thing is for certain though, if we continue to demand that cops police our fellow citizens every move and behavior, employing the full force of government power against those who have not themselves engaged in violent behavior, but instead are merely practicing some lifestyle which we do not approve of, or at worst, committing some minor victimless infraction, the body count of innocent civilians will grow. That bad people that bad people do exist, there is no doubt. That doesn't justify a hyper aggressive police force constantly looking for skulls to bust open, because that's what we have. So that I will put the link of this in a low bar. It's really, there are better pieces that I will also be posting that goes into a little bit about the history of the police. All right, in terms of where they truly came from. But and I also want to post from InfoShop, the anti-police portal, which has a lot of great links to other websites and articles that help dealing with this, that help bring to question about the role of the police and what other people are out there doing to counter police brutality. Oh, hey, Vuk, how you doing? Unfortunately, you didn't. You come to the end of my broadcast, but sorry about that. So I wanted to talk about these things, and those are the two things I wanted to get off my chest: the role of family, the purpose of family, and the purpose and role of the police. Me personally, no, we don't need them. If I wanted to, if anyone wanted to, and you wanted to deal with a rash of thefts in your area or something like that, the people in your area, your neighbors, are in a better position of dealing with things like that than the police ever will. The police, you call them, they'll come out, they'll say, well, you do live in a high crime area. They'll say whatever. They'll do their little investigation and they'll never catch the person who did it. And who knows, man, maybe you might not ever catch the person who stole your shit. But one thing that's true is that other people will begin to think, hey, will begin to see, hey, our neighbors are organizing themselves to protect and look out for each other. Maybe it's not such a good idea to rip off my neighbors. You know, who knows, man? All I know is we don't need the police. Fuck them. We've got a bunch of idiots who are, and now we've got like these guys with PTSD, and I'm not like putting down veterans or anything like that, but you got way too many dudes out there with bully mentalities. They're racists. They hate women. They hate immigrants. There's just way too many of them. They are not qualified to police anyone, not anyone, especially communities of color and poor and working class people. All right, this is the Garage Autonomist. I'm open to comments in the comments section and questions uh, where I can answer you on that. So on the things that I've said. Uh, so I'm welcome to anything that you have to say on this issue and or to expand it. All right, the links will be posted in the low bar as soon as this video is rendered, or maybe a little bit after. I've got a couple of other things I need to take care of before my wife and I head out. But peace, and I will see you guys with an actual real video either Monday or Tuesday evening. All right. All right, peace. This is the Garage Autonomist.